Today, we're going to give you 5 running backs you should be avoiding in your fantasy leagues. And look, obviously, 6 running backs. Sorry. Obviously, us coming out and saying this is bold. And for some of these guys, we're going to go off a little bit of gut feeling here, but also some good research. So make sure you're taking that into consideration when you're making these snap judgments. Do us a huge favor. Make sure you have liked this video, and please make sure you're subscribed. We're trying to grow this channel, get it to 1,000 subscribers. So do your part. Make sure you're subscribed. We're going to bring you content all through the entire fantasy season, weekly rankings, weekly breakdowns, player analysis, roster analysis. So make sure you're subscribed. We're going to have all kinds of strategy videos for you as well. Make sure you're subscribed over at Dynasty Domain as well. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, we got merch over there and things like that. And like I said, today we're talking about avoid these running backs. We can't, if you know the two of us, we cannot do a video with the words avoid and running backs in the title without putting Tony Pollard in the video. It is like against everything in our being not to say Tony Pollard, somebody you should be avoiding this year. Underdog ADP, Tony Pollard, the running back 7. Ahead of Derrick Henry.
Someone please just shoot me in the foot.
I'm done talking. You talk. I'm too mad. Just go.
This is unreal. Absolutely unreal. Derrick Henry, who has been a premier elite cheat code asset for the last 5 years, has now been usurped by Tony Pollard, who has been stuck in a committee backfield system for the last 4 seasons with Zeke Elliott, and has now been franchise tagged by his team, who doesn't want to pay him, who is coming off of a broken fibula. And yes, everyone's saying, well, guys, look at Tony Pollard. He produced as a running back 1 when Zeke was injured for 1 game last year. That is not enough of a sample size to say that Tony Pollard will automatically be a running back 1 every single week that he plays, independent of Ezekiel Elliott. It's a completely different offensive system now that Kellen Moore is gone. They're going to pass the ball more. They're going to use Dak Prescott more.
He was a running back 1 last year, though.
Who, Tony Pollard?
Yeah.
But I'm saying he was a running back 1 the single week that Zeke Elliott was injured. Therefore, Tony Pollard is automatically going to be a running back 1 every single week he doesn't play with Zeke Elliott this year. It just automatically means that he's going to be a
that logic is flawed.
It's incredibly flawed.
Yeah.
There's not enough of a sample size to say that. Aside from Tony Pollard, I cannot get over the fact that he's ahead of Derrick Henry, according to Underdog ADP. Like, what are we smoking here? He's ahead of Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, who's currently at RB10.
Holy smokes.
Like, at this point, we should just be doing it. We should have done a second.
Standard leagues, he was the RB1
We should have done
year.
another video on running backs to buy. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how many good values there are here. He's behind, or Tony Pollard is ahead of Breece Hall. He's ahead of, so
Jahmyr
many
Gibbs
guys. So
is way
many,
down there?
Yeah, so many veterans. I mean, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders. These are all guys that I legitimately believe are going to outproduce Tony Pollard this season.
And guys, we say this with a little bit of statistical basis. We think that the Cowboys,
a little bit,
given Mike McCarthy's history on run versus pass, we think that the Cowboys are going to pass the ball more than they did.
Yeah.
We think Tony Pollard's going to get a little bit less usage than he was in his current role. And also, we think part of the reason Tony Pollard was so efficient was because of the fact that he was splitting a backfield. Tony Pollard coming off an injury as a workhorse back, I'm interested to see if that works out for them. We are betting it does not.
McCarthy tends to run the ball more when he has a true committee backfield, a true functioning committee backfield in his offense. If there's more of a bell cow, you could say, or dominant running back in that offense, there's just less volume to go around in that backfield from a run game perspective anyways, and they end up passing the ball more. So that's something you can take our word for.
All right, you've got Rhamondre here.
So Rhamondre Stevenson is currently running back 9, just behind Derrick Henry, which I think is just a joke again, and just ahead of Josh Jacobs, who was a dominant high-end running back 1 last season. Did he finish as running back 1 overall?
Josh Jacobs?
Yeah.
He was the running back 3 in PPR leagues, the running back 1 in standard leagues, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. So
in PPR leagues, Eckler had him, and who else was it? Somebody else. Henry?
No.
Henry's 4.
Yeah.
Who was it? Who am I missing?
Eckler was running back 1, and then Was it CMC?
Yeah, it might have been.
I think it was CMC. Yeah. But with Rhamondre, this guy is he started really strong, and he ended as a running back 1 last season, running back 7 overall, I think, and from a PPR perspective,
From a standard scoring perspective.
Yep. And this guy was really slowed down towards the end of the season. And Damian Harris got injured, and Rhamondre, I think, was just really struggling being the sole guy in that offense. And once Damian Harris came back, it got even worse because they wanted to utilize Damian Harris more.
Damian Harris was going to get cut, and then he came back and started taking snaps from Rhamondre.
Yeah, I think that's just really telling what
Bill Belichick doesn't care, guys.
This is what's always true about the New England backfield. Once they start producing at a hyper-productive level, then Belichick doesn't want that to happen again. And then they just implement another committee backfield system there in that offense. Who's it going to be? I don't know who's going to be this year, but Rhamondre, he'll probably be the dominant running back 1 in that offense. But how much is that really saying in a New England backfield? We've seen it for decades, guys. Decades. You do not want to be relying on a New England Patriots running back like Rhamondre Stevenson to be your running back 1 on your fantasy team. He's not going to be reliable even throughout the season. He's not going to be consistent, and he may even fall off again towards the end of the season. We don't know. But what we do know is that he should not be going ahead of Josh Jacobs in fantasy.
True.
That should not be happening.
Our next guy on here is going to be Cam Akers. With Cam Akers, his current ADP on Underdog is running back 23. I guarantee it will be higher after this week because there have been headlines out of camp that Sean McVay has said, oh, we're going to use Cam Akers. Oh, he's this hidden gem. Oh, he's going to be I mean, do you not remember last year when they were trying to trade Cam Akers and literally nobody wanted him? When Cam Akers refused to play. I mean, we're projecting him as a running back too. Like, if you're drafting Cam Akers as the running back 2 on your team, you have to be scared. That's a scary thing, in my opinion.
Terrified.
With
Not
Cam
to
Akers,
mention completely limiting your upside.
I mean, not only have the injuries been a concern over Cam Akers' career, but the consistency really hasn't been there. And a lot of people are going to look at his I think a lot of people have been cherry picking 4 games and extrapolating that over a whole season. You can't do that. You could do that with any fantasy player and be like, oh, in these 4 games, you take D-Hop's for first 4 games or best 4 games. He's the wide receiver 1 overall. Because he is. We can't just do that. So with Cam Akers, look, I'm taking safer assets as my running back 2 this year in fantasy. I'm taking somebody that I believe in more. And Cam Akers, while he's on a crappy team, Cam Akers is not really a super good running back.
Akers is going right around Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Swift.
You're taking, you're taking the guys ahead of him
all day long. Yeah. And this is Cam Akers. Look, you could make an argument that him going at RB23 is not the most abysmal thing ever. And honestly, I would probably agree with you, but I am never drafting Cam Akers as the RB23, expecting him to produce any higher than that. And you only win fantasy leagues if you're drafting ceiling, if you're drafting guys that at their current position have the upside to produce as a high-end running back 2 or a low-end running back 1 that are going at the low-end running back 2 position. And Cam Akers literally does not have that upside. Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Swift do. Heck, even Dameon Pierce has higher upside than Cam Akers does from a fantasy perspective this season. Yeah. And they're all going around the same spot in ADP.
Yep, they're around Cam Akers and ADP. There are a lot safer options. You've got a guy that's also going around Cam Akers and ADP that's not a safe option. That's going to be Isiah Pacheco.
Isiah Pacheco he had a very strong finish to the season last year. We will fully admit that. And honestly, it was a lot of fun to watch him in the postseason. Yeah. And he showed some receiving upside that we were really encouraged by and honestly justifies where he's been going recently in fantasy and dynasty startups. But I think with him, we're just mostly concerned with the fact that KC went out of their way to re-sign McKinnon, who's a 31-year-old running back. And yes, while he's a team leader and a team captain, there's no reason they should be re-signing a 31-year-old running back unless they absolutely need him and absolutely want to utilize him. And McKinnon went off last season towards the end of the year as well. And that could really hurt Pacheco's game-by-game production this coming season and not a guy I want to be trusting as my running back 2 on my fantasy team. And I think I'm really going to be limiting my upside if I'm consistently taking him in best ball and in fantasy especially. So with this guy, his ADP going around, bell cow level running backs who maybe not bell cow anymore, but have been bell cow in the past. Again, same area as Dalvin Cook, same area as Rashad White. I mean, I'll take those guys over Pacheco easily, who's just, it's always going to be in limbo every single year since the exit of Kareem Hunt in the KC offense. They've just kind of changed the way they've used the running back position, and they're never going to really be able to afford to utilize it at a bruiser level. And they obviously have Patrick Mahomes, who's going to be passing it primarily to Travis Kelce. There's just only so much of a ceiling you can have with Isiah Pacheco in fantasy, and that's not winning you any championships. Next up is going to be David Montgomery, who's really kind of honestly the same concept, the same idea here. And the only reason he's been pushed up boards is because of his landing spot and the fact that Jamal Williams produced as a surprising running back 1 last year. Why do you think that's not going to happen to him this season?
Well, I have to say that I think the Lions are going to use Jahmyr Gibbs more than they used any of their running backs last year, because of the roles that the Lions running backs last year were falling into. Was DeAndre Swift was very efficient with his touches, was very efficient in the passing game, would get them all the way to the 1 yard line every freaking time, and Jamal Williams would punch it in.
If you counted how many times DeAndre Swift got within the 5 on his runs and didn't get to the end, like, he would easily have been a running back 1 if he had gotten half of those as touchdowns, and he didn't get any of them.
So with David Montgomery, I think they picked him up to fill that Jamal Williams role. However, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be more dominant than DeAndre Swift was. He's a better player than DeAndre Swift was. He's a better prospect. So I think he will be the lead back there, and I think he's good between the tackles. I think he's good in open space. I think David Montgomery's probably going to get less work than everybody thought he was, including the Lions, because they didn't know they would be getting Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. Once they did, I think they're going to give him everything they can. Now, is Jahmyr Gibbs going to be in every single down back on every drive? No, so they are going to use David Montgomery. However, I think Jahmyr Gibbs will get red zone touches too, so that's going to take away from David. I think David Montgomery is going to be probably a running back 3. Yeah, that's my prediction.
Montgomery just isn't as electric as Jamal Williams is either, honestly. Like that. He turned back the clock for the Lions, so he'll give him a couple more years. But Jamal Williams, I just thought was better in the red zone than Montgomery ever has been and ever will be. So I think that's another knock to his value, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. All right. Perine's going to be our last guy here. And with Perine, look, I understand that Javonte, there's going to be some risk with rostering him this year, some risk with using him also as wherever. I'm curious what his ADP is, Javonte's, compared to Perine's. But with Perine,
yeah, it's not much higher. So Perine is running back 34, I believe. Yeah, and then Javonte Williams is just 5 spots ahead of him at RB 29, going about a full round ahead of him.
And look, it just depends, but give me some guys around Perine that you'd rather have over him, because I know there are a lot safer options.
I'd rather have Brian Robinson.
Yes.
I'd rather have Zach Charbonnet.
Yes.
Like 10,000 times out of 10,000
times.
times. Give me Zach Charbonnet, especially in a PPR league. Give me that guy.
Yep.
AJ Dillon, who I've never been a fan of. I'll easily take Dillon over Perine. Damian Harris is going significantly past Perine. I'll take Damian Harris in the Buffalo offense, who's really replacing Singletary. And then even Antonio Gibson, PPR upside again. Those are kind of the guys that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and like I said, there are going to be a lot better options in this RB3 range, so we're going to be pivoting to those options instead of Perine. If Javonte comes back, it's Javonte's backfield. I think that's going to be the case. I don't think Perine's going to be the Melvin Gordon to Javonte's. I don't think he's going to be the boogeyman. But
I think it's worth taking a risk on Kendre Miller over Perine. And Kendre Miller is going multiple rounds past Perine.
Absolutely. So hopefully we gave you some good options to replace these guys. If you're not drafting these guys, some other guys that you should be looking at, some guys that you should be pivoting to. And again, these aren't guys that, we hate as players. We just don't like their value in fantasy right now. So keep that in mind as you make these evaluations, as you evaluate this video as well. And it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. So do us a huge favor. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you're subscribed. We're trying to get to 1K. So it really helps us out if you subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed over at Dynasty Domain as well. If you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, make sure you're checking out Fozzie Football. That's the game up there. Check it out on their website and use code DOMAIN to get a discount on that. We've got merch over on Dynasty Domain as well. We'll link that over here pretty soon. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.